Now, there are many ways to learn about ethical business practices, including resources that you're seeing on the screen and at the North Texas Ethics Association website. However, for most companies, ethics starts with leadership who make it a priority. And today, we are fortunate to have one such leader who has long made ethics a cornerstone of his organization. Craig Hall is a local entrepreneur, real estate magnate, philanthropist, civil leader, author, and winemaker. He founded Hall Group 50 years ago with $4,000 while working from ages 10 to 18. Today, Hall Group has an active operations in commercial real estate, structured financial lending, winemaking, and early stage startup investments. Craig actively supports new entrepreneurs, and he's the author of 6 published books, including a New York Times bestseller, A Perfect Score, which he co-authored with his wife, Catherine. Craig is dedicated to volunteerism and emphasizes integrity, transparency, and responsible business practices as core Hall Group principles. Hall Group serves the communities in which it operates through the company's We Care platform, and it's an example of a company that recognizes the benefits of ethical business practices. Remember, I said that business ethics starts with the leadership and those who value good business. It's my pleasure to introduce just such a leader as today's keynote speaker, Mr. Craig Hall.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I echo the thanks to Michael Webb for all this effort in this program. I think the whole idea of honoring companies that show positive ethics and a positive corporate responsibility is terrific, and I'd like to also add my congratulations to AT&T and La Madeleine, 2 great corporate citizens of Dallas and great companies. I'm actually very humbled to be, ethics is something you shouldn't really talk about in the sense of personal, from a standpoint of, let's start with a very nice introduction, but everybody makes mistakes, and there are many things that I could look back at and say I should have done this differently or that differently in terms of how we do things. But I do think that ethics really start with a basic position of truth and facts. And I believe that with rare exceptions, there is relative truth at some times, but for the most part, truth is not that complicated. And when we make it complicated, it's maybe because we're trying to play games or have shortcuts. And certainly throughout this is my 50th year in business, throughout my 50 years, I've seen a lot of shortcuts. I probably never really would have been good at that, because if you're taking shortcuts and you're a little dishonest and you're taking the truth and bending it, you really have to be smart, and you have to kind of remember who you told what to, or you have to be a bully, and like some people in the country today, and I wasn't good at either of those, so I'm just never thought about anything except trying to be who I was and transparent, and I believe, as has already been said, that that's the kind of good business as well. I'd like to just briefly talk about 2 different stories of kind of ethics. One from a historical time that some of you out in the reception mentioned to me, the 1980s, and that's kind of a time of some failed ethics in Dallas and elsewhere. And then secondly, a kind of personal story about software business. And as was noted in the introduction, I am a person who must lack focus because I'm in so many different businesses. But my second example will be about the software business, which I was in, recently sold out of my software companies. But to start with the 1980s, uh, in ethics is kind of complicated in the sense that just because somebody else does something that isn't right, or our government may do something that isn't right, doesn't give you a license to change right and wrong. And I think that ethics really circles all about the simple concept of doing what's right rather than what's easy, doing what's right rather than what's convenient or greedy or profitable in the short run, and I would submit a big mistake in the long run. Interestingly, in the 1981-82 period, regulators in the savings and loan industry came around to real estate developers and said, hey, savings and loans are having problems. Would you like to buy one? And you don't have to, people don't remember this part. You know, they remember the 1986 crisis, but in 81, 82, they were coming around to young guys in their 20s and saying, hey, you don't have to have cash, just we'll appraise a piece of land that you own, and you can put that in as regulatory capital, and we want you to go out there and be very aggressive because the S&Ls are losing money because they have these house loans at low rates, and we deregulated deposits, and so they're having to pay higher rates, and they don't know what to do, so you young guys come in and be aggressive. That was implicit rather than explicit, but nevertheless it was what happened. And a lot of these young guys, I knew many owners of S&Ls who were in their 20s. Smart guys. One guy that is in my head is a guy who was a Harvard MBA, a whole lot smarter than I was, and really smart guy. But in a sense, the government was encouraging everyone to be aggressive. Some of them took that too far. By the way, I was a real estate guy. I had that same call, and I bought a savings and loan for some land. I paid zero cash. I didn't have any money. Most of the guys didn't have any money. They wanted our aggressiveness. So what happened? Fast forward to the mid-'80s. In 1986, the tax law was changed for the first time ever retroactively. That meant values of commercial real estate were going to plummet. Well, that was already going to happen because we had way too much building in the 1980s before that. So between those two things, real estate was bound to take down savings and loans. And I think it got particularly worse for Texas for reasons that may or may not be correct, but my opinion is a lot of the Eastern establishment remembered the days when Texas had bumper stickers that says, freeze a Yankee, in the mid-'70s. There was a lot of comeuppance to it, but the truth is, for those of us who remember, Dallas was a great banking town until the mid-'80s. And I think a lot of people on the East Coast enjoyed knocking over our banks and making them part of banks from other places besides Texas. Fortunately, we've had new banks that have, like Texas Capital, that have been started here that have done very well. But it was a chaotic, difficult time. And go back to the early 1980s, and a lot of these S&Ls were growing fast and making a lot of money, but they were doing things that were both unethical and really illegal. And what is the difference between ethics and legal? Ethics is maybe a step higher than legal, but we have lots of laws in this country, and oftentimes they're not used or enforced. But when the government wants to get someone, they can find a way. And I know in the period of 1986 on, there were task force in Dallas that were, and I'm sure I know I was investigated at length. Everybody was. Most people, so many people, went to prison. Young people went to prison for 20, 30, 40-year terms. A lot of them ended up not spending that much time, but they ended up spending 10, 15 years, and just think of that. So one minute you're a Harvard MBA and you're bought a business and you're growing, and the next minute you're in prison. And part of what they went to prison for were little things, lying on a form when you're getting a bank loan. A lot of it was quid pro quo lending. If you loan me this money to buy that, I'll loan you this money to buy that, and we each do deals that we otherwise couldn't find an arm's length bank to do. And, you know, I guess part of what that era showed is that, you know, kind of as I said jokingly earlier, I'm not smart enough. I just think it's anytime you take a shortcut, you ought to feel like you may get away with it, but you know what? Hindsight can come at any time. And in this case, hindsight came, and a lot of people who just had really poor judgment really got hit probably a lot harder than they would have in normal times. So that's kind of the ultimate downside of ethics, and one that really, I think Dallas was maybe one of the epicenters on a national basis for the difficult times we went through. And at the same time, right is right and wrong is wrong. And I'm not in any way suggesting that the people who got caught shouldn't have paid a price. I think some of them paid a bigger price than maybe was reasonable, and actually a lot of it got reduced over time. But nevertheless, they did things that they shouldn't have done. And it wasn't, you know, so I had so many opportunities to do the same things. And I didn't. And I didn't because, not because I'm a goody-goody and so great, I just knew they were wrong. And didn't think it was a matter of getting caught or not getting caught. It's just a matter of, we all make mistakes, but don't compound them by trying to cut corners and trying to operate where you're going to get a little edge. I mean, what is life so important that you need a little edge? If it is, there's something wrong. We live in the greatest country in the world. We have phenomenal opportunity in this country. There's no reason to take shortcuts. There's no need to take shortcuts. So let me kind of switch to a more optimistic story, and I could talk about the SNL days for hours, but I won't. I'll spare you. And by the way, you know, we owned 2 SNLs and a bank, and at that time 72,000 apartments. It went on for a long time, and I was in lots of civil litigation, but I was never in the other kind. And, you know, I just can't imagine how, you know, why bring that pain on yourself or your family? Anyway, the good thing is in civil litigation as well, if you don't have anything to hide and you have always been transparent and honest and straightforward, the worst that can happen is you just get into a disagreement, whether it's a disagreement with the lender or someone else in a civil matter. It works itself out. And by the way, I was in one sense, I'll say one more thing then move on. My transparency in the short run can work to your disadvantage. I wrote all our investors in January of 1986 and said, here's what I see happening, and I think there's going to be all these problems. Steve Brown with the Dallas Morning News got a copy of the letter, called me and said, can I talk to you about this? And I said, sure. And the next day I was on my way out of town, and I looked at the, actually Cheryl Hall, who's over here. I think she had a lot to do with this story. She was the business editor, and I've heard rumors that she and Steve called the paper downtown. Anyway, I think it was on the top of they stopped the presses. Now that's pretty cool. You've seen that on TV? I did hear this story a few years ago recently. So they literally called and said, stop the presses, and they wrote this story about what I was saying. And at that time, we were not in default on one loan. We had, I think, $2.5 or $3 billion of loans. We were not in default one penny to anyone. But I foresaw that we were going to be, and I foresaw problems, and I was transparent with my investors and with the newspapers. Now, at that moment, if you'd asked me the day or two after that, do you think that was a smart move? Maybe not so much. But as time has gone on, I've asked myself that question many times. It'd be a great study for some academic purpose, but I don't regret it in the sense that I don't regret ever being direct and transparent. I think it's just always served me well, and I think that kind of relates to ethics. Ethics, I think it was unethical cumulatively of the government to retroactively change tax laws. But you know what? Life isn't fair. I tell all my kids as they're growing up, and you take the breaks. That doesn't give you a license to lower your own standards to that same level. Even though you get a bad break here or there, you need to buck up, step up, stand up, and step back and say, hey, I'm just lucky to be alive. I'm lucky to be in this country, and nobody's got an excuse to take a shortcut. So let me put it in a different perspective and make this one fairly quick. In 2006, I had a small software company, and I was talking with the president of that company, and I said either we should try to sell or we should try to buy somebody bigger. And he made a list of companies to buy, and one of them, it turned out, was someone else from Dallas, a public company. And I picked up the phone, and this is a person that I had known for many years. And because this person respected me and we had a good rapport, we were able to do a deal in a very short period of time that turned out to be good for everyone. That's what a reputation and a business, positive, responsible business, you get benefits. You get things like that that make up for little things that you didn't get by taking shortcuts. So I do believe good ethics are good business, and I just hope that we do a lot to raise that awareness for kids in business schools and universities today. I'd like to close by saying that I think ethics today may be more important than ever. I really want to be careful here and not say this in a partisan way, and I may make some people mad no matter what I say, and that's okay. But the rhetoric, and first of all, we live in a time where there's just, in business and in our public life, there's just seems like a fair amount of greed and a fair amount of, the good news is things are coming out about people like the Harvey Weinstein stuff, and maybe it's a time to cleanse and get a lot of things out, and maybe we can get healthier. But a lot of kind of underbelly bad things of that nature. And then when I look at the White House today, and I think back when I talk about ethics, talk about kind of the thing that I think maybe is hand in glove with ethics is the rule of law. And I'm hopeful that the rule of law will carry the day, because I think that we are demeaning very important parts of our government. My wife was a U.S. ambassador. I got to see firsthand how valuable the FBI, the CIA, the State Department, a lot of people that work so hard there, and to see if I, as a CEO, went around saying that the people in our advertising department are all a bunch of idiots, and I can't stand how stupid they are, and they'd quit, they'd leave. Well, guess what? A lot of people I know from the State Department are quitting and leaving. And you know what? We are going to need them at some point in the future, and it's important. And I bring it up because I think at some point, all of us, whether it's in your company or in other ways, all of us are going to be tested. And part of corporate responsibility that comes from the leadership on down, and part of individual corporate or individual personal responsibility in ethics is there'll come a time in your life when the question is, do you stand up or do you take the easy route and not stand up? And I tell you, we all need to stand up, and we're being tested, and we are the greatest country in the world. We have extraordinary opportunity. Let's work together to preserve it for generations to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Craig. Those are some really good words, good thoughts. So many times the speakers want to just tell you what they think you want to know. I'm appreciative of the sharing. We've had some ups and downs, and it's nice to share that with other people. And I thank you for your time today. Thank you.